So since social media has become such an important part of society, I wanted to see if the effects of social media is actually changing our political environment. So through this presentation, I will look at the overviews of my theory, the research process, the hypothesis that I came up with, the method section I used after coming up with my hypothesis, any ethical issues that I would come into contact with when conducting my method section, the findings that I came up with, and then conclusion of the results. So here are the overview of my theories, and the first one I kind of built up my research proposal on was fake news, because the word fake news has been thrown around so much since the 2016 election. And what fake news is practically kind of just rumors, and they're so commonly seen on social media because you can just kind of post whatever you want. And then the next thing I looked at was reliance on social media for political news has rapidly increased since 2016. And if the reliance on social media for political news has rapidly increased since 2016, and fake news has been booming, or the word has been booming since 2016, I wonder if that actually started to change the way people viewed our political environment. Next, social media is just as effective as traditional campaigning methods, and what this means is that posting on social media can get your message out there just as well as making a TV commercial. And the last one is actually just a general thing for social media, and it's falsehoods spread around significantly faster than truths. So when actually going through to create my proposal, I had to do research, and I came through 4 studies that I thought really built a nice basis for my research, and I'll go more in-depthly with them right now. So the first one was social media's contribution to misconceptions in U.S. presidential elections. So what this study did is they looked at the 2016 election, they looked at the 2012 election, and they created like a survey, or like a 2-panel survey that had 2 lies for each candidate in it. And what people do would just say like, oh, I think this is true, oh, I think this is false. Despite how these falsehoods were spread all over social media, a lot of people didn't believe them regardless. I actually have the panel surveys from the real study, and as you can see, the percentage of people actually believing them is fairly low. The next that I looked at was political expression on social media, the role of communication, competence, and expected outcomes. So what this one looked at was more of how mass communication methods affected people's conversations, and this one focused on it more politically. So this was actually research done by the University of Wisconsin, and they looked at 10 different cities in Columbia, so it wasn't looking at American politics, but I still think it was important information to include. And they surveyed random Colombian adults lived in urban areas. That was the only stipulation. And they learned that Facebook's users felt the more they attained new information and learned new things and like discussed on social media, that their peers actually respected them, while Twitter was more of younger users, and they kind of just shared their information, and they didn't gain as much respect as the Facebook users used, and the Facebook users were an slightly older adult generation. I thought this study was important to include because it shows evidence of how political conversation online is so important for democracies, and how that social media can actually can help you predict what people are thinking, or just their expression in general. So the next survey I looked at was the spread of true and false news online, and this research looked at all stories shared on Twitter from 2006 to 2016. So they looked at 1,206,000 stories tweeted, shared by 3 million people, and then to make sure these stories were true or false, because that's what they looked at, they contacted 6 independent fact-checking companies, and they would be like, oh, this story's false, this story's fake. So it was found that all the false stories, more of the times, were shared more than true stories, and this is because they inferred because people love novelty, and they were probably more exciting, so they're like, oh wow, this story's so cool, like, I want all my followers to see it, so false stories tend to spread faster than true stories. So the next one I looked at was called We Face, I Tweet, How Different Social Media Influence Political Participation Through Collective and Internal Efficiency. So this study looked at theoretical models on collecting data that would explain whether or not Facebook and Twitter are kind of changing people's political opinions. So they collected data in 3 different ways. The first way was a theoretical model, the next way was a 2-way panel design, and the last way gauged the S&S effects separately. So this was also a 2-way panel where respondents for this study were interviewed 9 months apart, and then that's how they got their data. So the test revealed that there was no significant differences in waves in demographics, social media usage, and participation. So what that really means is that it didn't matter like how old they were, what demographics they were, and how often they used social media. It really didn't change their opinions regardless. So after looking over my research process, we'll get to my hypothesis. And I came up with 2 hypotheses, and the first one was social media use will be positively related to people having unrealistic views of politics. And what this really means is that I originally thought that since social media, all the falsehoods that are spread, and falsehoods tend to spread faster, that people would see things on social media and tend to believe it, and then not have an appropriate representation of what the political environment really looks like. So then my next one was H2, and this said social media use frequently will lead to lower levels of political participation. And I said this one because I read during my research that 2016 was one of the lowest it was one of the lowest times people voted. They didn't have a lot of voters come out, and I think a lot of that had to do with because they didn't like the candidates because of the false news and all the drama behind it. So I wanted to see if this would affect like other political events or future political events. So next was my method section, and this is actually how I gathered data for my proposal, and I did a 10-question survey. It was obviously survey research. It was also quantitative, and what it did was just, I wanted to encourage a wide range of age, gender, and political affiliation to look at it because I wanted to get the majority of people. I didn't want this to be any unbiased or any way like that. So it was also anonymous because I feel like when people answer things anonymously, they tend to tell the truth better when their name isn't connected to it, and it was really just designed to gain people's opinions about the political environment. So next was, because I created a survey, there's always going to be ethical issues you're going to run into. So the first one I could have possibly ran into was people filling out the survey seriously. It was posted on Facebook and Twitter. It was anonymous, so people really could have just clicked through and answered whatever, and it didn't matter. So that possibly could have swayed the results a little bit. The next one was getting people to actually participate in the survey because I didn't have any, like, hey, if you take my survey, here's $5 to Chipotle. Like, it was kind of like, please take my survey, I need this for class. So getting people to take it, I did get enough people so it wasn't like a super unbiased amount, but that is an issue you can run into. And then another one, which is kind of similar to the first one, is an unequal amount of people from each political party taking it. So I wanted it to be a pretty equal amount of people from like Democrats and Republicans because I didn't want it just to be how Democrats feel the political environment looks. So this is my findings for H1, and actually I split up my survey questions and results based off each hypothesis because some questions were targeted more towards one hypothesis than the other. So I picked question 4, question 5, and question 10. So question 4 says, does social media help you pick which candidate you want to support? And 81% of people said no, and 18% of people said yes. Question 5 said, do you believe social media represents candidates accurately? And nobody said yes, which is kind of frightening, and 65% said no, and 34% said occasionally. Question 10 is, do you think social media properly represents the political environment? And 10% yes, and 89% no. So what I got from this is that people are aware of, yes, there are falsehoods being spread on social media, and yes, there is fake news out there, but they don't believe it as much as I originally thought. So now we're going to look at the findings that I think relate more to my hypothesis number 2. And hypothesis number 2 says social media use frequently will lower people's levels of political information, participation. And so I asked questions that kind of asked for how much you will participate in politics. So I used question number 6, question number 7, question number 9. Does social media encourage you to participate in politics? And 26% of people said yes, 57% of people said no, and 16% of people said occasionally. Question 7, are you more likely to participate in politics if people didn't post about it on social media? And this one's kind of related back to the idea of, like, why did nobody vote as much in the 2016 election? Were they not campaigning enough? Were people just annoyed with Trump posting on Twitter at all times? So I decided to ask this question. And 36% of people said yes, and 63% of people said no. And then you have question 9 that says, did social media contribute to your decision to vote in the 2016 election? 12% of people said yes, and 87% of people said no. So really what this is saying is people are going to participate in political events regardless of social media. It doesn't matter as much of what you're saying or the falsehoods being spread. People are going to vote or they're not going to vote. So this is the conclusion of my results, and it's really just there's a small relationship between social media and how people view the political environment. It doesn't mean like that politics has zero effect on any. It's just not as strong as I originally thought it was going to be. The results show that people are aware of social media's effects, but they don't give in to the lies as much again as I originally thought. Like with the study that I looked at earlier, they put lies in that were very commonly known in the 2012 and 2016 election, and people are like, yeah, I've heard of this, but I don't really believe it that much. And the last one is social media doesn't encourage people to participate in political events, but it also doesn't discourage them. And again, this just means that regardless of what you're posting or what you're saying, people are going to vote or they're not going to vote. So that's my research proposal on how social media affects the political environment.